Welcome everybody to the Transportation and Environment Committee. We have two items on our agenda today. First is some CIP amendments, continued discussion on the FY 19 to 24 CIP amendments regarding Veers Mill Road BRT, the BIPs, and the Forest Glen Passageway and Forest Glen Sidewalk. Dr. Orlin.
Yes, good afternoon. The first one is Mr. Reamer's proposing at the last work session accelerating the BRT design funds for Veers Mill Road BRT by 3 years. It's currently programmed to take place in fiscal years 23, 24, and 25, and his recommendation is to move it forward to FY 20, 21, and 22. Same dollar amount, just sooner. All I'm pointing out is that when you do that, it sort of puts the project in a position where we probably need to know in the next year or so where the money might be coming from to build it, because we don't want to spend $7 million in design and then have nowhere to go with it. So don't need to know that now, but I think it needs to be a commitment that be done. I think Mr. Roshdi wants to talk about this too.
If we didn't have the commitment, we can always readjust.
You could.
Right. Okay, Director Roshdi.
Thank you. The only comments I have here is in just a matter of a few months, ready to present to you the Route 355 BRT, which is going to be at the same stage as this project. And I think at that point, it will be better if you could wait and decide which project to move forward, because that's another important project that we are working on, and it will be at the LPA in just a matter of next few months.
I guess the only thing I'd say, just thinking about this, is that is it possible the executive might be recommending accelerating or wanting to program that as design starting in FY 20? I know you can't commit, but is there a thought that in March?
No, March 15 is too early. I think we will be able to brief the executive toward the end of April. So I would say sometimes in the mid, we could do a supplemental as well, or we don't get and brief the council. Anyway, our plan is, as soon as we have the project alternatives, brief the county executive, brief the stakeholders, council, and obviously at that point. So my suggestion is, if you could wait and then at that point make a decision, you want to move forward with the 355 BRT or the Veers Mill. Not that Veers Mill is not important, but there might be reasons that one would be more urgent than the other.
And you can amend the CIP at any time, whether you do it now, by now I mean really May, or you do it in July. It's still 6 votes, and it'd start after that point. So it won't make significantly that much difference.
Thank you, Tom. Would the capacity that you need to study 355 North, wouldn't it be helpful to try to address the CIP with capacity for a system built in at the earliest opportunity, and then if the council were to decide that 355 North would be the preferred route, we would almost already figured out where the funding could come from. We would potentially swap 355 and Veers Mill. Glenn, is that not really something that we ought to worry about?
Well, if you approve the money as shown here for Veers Mill, you're also appropriating the entire $7 million to that project. Mm-hmm. So I think unless the decision were made, unless you sort of knew enough information from what the executive wants to propose before you approve this budget, like say by early May, even if there isn't a CIP amendment yet, you could maybe make an adjustment at that point. But I think once you get to the time you approve the budget, you're going to be in a position to appropriate $7 million. Now, nobody likes to use the D word, disappropriate, but that's basically what you'd be doing if you then take that money and move it to another project. So I don't know, I guess the way I feel about it right now, having listened to what Al said, is that it might make sense if we know that the recommendation is going to come over by this spring to hold off on doing this now, and then you can still again do a CIP amendment for this, just what you're showing. or 355, or, maybe both, I don't know, it's hard to say. But you can make that decision just a little later in the spring.
The other alternative to get where you want to be, Mr. Hans, is putting the funds in the BRT projects, not specifically for Weir's Mill or 355. My concern about this was creating expectation in the community, and then if the decision is not to move forward, then that's going to be the problem. So
Yeah, I'd rather not do that, just because the general BRT project is for development, it's for planning, and this is, the BRT project for Pierceville Road is really for detailed design and construction. So, I think the better way to go might be just to wait until we know from the executive, as long as we're not waiting and waiting and waiting. I mean, if we know the information by late this spring, even if it doesn't meet in time of
anyway,
the budget.
for local preferred alternative, you have to come to you and present you the alternatives and what we are recommending as the local preferred.
So you're presently planning to do that this spring?
Yes, I would say summer, because at the end of April, as I said, we will present this to the county executive, and then we will go to CACs as well as park and planning, and then ultimately coming to the council and municipalities. So we'll come to you. So I would.
You come to us at the conclusion of that?
Yeah, to bring all the comments, because you want to hear.
Because you have a number of alternatives.
Yes.
And then you solicit comments on a number of alternatives.
That's correct.
And then you bring all that to the council,
Yes.
to the T&E committee.
That's correct.
And the T committee resolves a
Well, in
LPA.
fact, I think the way the master plan from 2013 talks about a requirement that council have a public hearing. So I think you'd have a public hearing on the alternatives.
When you want to fund it.
To allocate construction funding.
Yes.
Won't you be able to, aside from the locally preferred alternative debate, won't you have a recommendation on 355 versus Weir's Mill by April?
Yes.
You will, right?
Yes, we will come back
Right.
and we'll
So
tell
that's
you
a
what is it that. the
Additional
executive-
argument that the LPA might be ready later, but if we want to make a decision in April, we'll still have a recommendation from you in April, correct? On one versus the other, one corridor versus the other.
Yes,
For the 7 million.
after I present this to the county executive.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's your recommendation as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
But
what the exact timing is, I don't know. All I'm saying is if it's, even if it's not April, if it's later, look, there's no real magic to actually having this in the CIP that you adopted, but just before Memorial Day.
The key is you want to select the local preferred alternative because you want to fund the design.
Yeah.
If that is the case, you want to have all the inputs from all the community and the stakeholders and planning, and then go from there.
Right.
Okay,
So that makes us wait till June?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, you're not gonna lose much time. I mean, look, we say it's 3 years to do design.
We are
Thing
moving
is-
as fast as we
Right.
can on the
Right.
355 BRT because I feel that that is one of our critical corridors that needs attention.
interesting. Okay. And if we keep it in and we just say, okay, we'll hear from you when you're ready, but we'll keep this in for now, then the implication of that is,
Well, it's just a little more difficult to then take the money out of it and move it to the other project. And you're not gaining much time. I mean, yes, if you approve this as part of the May budget, you could start work, you can start procurement of design beginning of July.
Okay.
But, we're talking about a 3-year process for design.
Yeah.
If it slips a couple months, you're still accelerating the project by 2 years and 9 months instead of 3 years. I mean,
the basic point though being, you could only do one of these systems most likely. Do you generally concur with that, Glenn?
well, I don't know. It depends how much money,
Depends what you do, right?
Yeah, how much money you want to spend on this, how soon. It also depends on, you probably could find the money to do the design for both if you needed to. I'm not sure where to find the money exactly. It's too early. I get these questions all the time. When are we going to know how much money we have? I don't know. I won't know till the end. But the real key is construction, because if you get design done in the same time frame, then suddenly 3 years from now, oh my God, we got to do 355 North.
That's what I was
and
asking.
in Pierceville
Do you
Road.
think there's any scenario where you would have enough construction dollars for 2
This
systems.
is just me going out on a limb. I think you're gonna need a new revenue source.
That's a
We
limb.
don't know what that is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
So I guess we should hold off for now, it
What's
sounds
the
like.
downside of holding off till June?
Nah,
When we know more,
much,
we'll
yeah.
know what the exact ones. Right. Right, we'll have more information. There's many opportunities to look good in committed to transit in June, too. Okay, all right, that's a decision. Fine.
Okay.
To go with Veers Mill?
Not to
No, to hold
postpone.
off on this decision.
Not do
till
it
June,
now.
Till we get this.
Based on
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. All right, thank you. Okay, BIPAs.
At the last work session, pointed out that the executive, for fiscal reasons, recommended reducing the project by $5.2 million, about a third of the program. Mr. Reamer said an alternative to that really is not to cut it at all, but in fact add money to it. And I spoke with Mr. Reamer after the meeting, and his recommendation now is that we add $1.5 million in FY '20 over what's in the approved CIP now. So instead of going down by 5.2, it would go up by 1.5. And so we asked DOT, well, what does that mean in terms of all the sub-projects within the BIPA programs? That's what all these bullets are. Really what the bullets are is a lot of sub-projects that are really moving forward by either a year or part of a year. These aren't really new projects for the most part. They're projects that were already programmed, but they could be done a year or maybe 6 months earlier, with the exception of maybe the few bullets near the end where there were sub-projects that were beyond the 6-year period now move into FY '24. That's the effect of it. And so the question is whether you want to now recommend that as an amendment.
Okay, Mr. Rushdie, any objections to having money dispensed?
No,
here?
not at all. This project is very dear to me, it's important, and the only concern I have is by separating the PDFs, it will hinder our ability to implement project faster. Because right now, if their funding is in one PDF, we will have a broader scope, we can pick up and do the projects quicker, rather than if it's a specific area, but we will try to be very wide area, but it's for the low-hanging fruits and the projects that can be implemented quick, it will limit that capability.
That is something Mr. Rimmer had also suggested, splitting up the BIP into separate BIPs,
Two.
smaller BIPs.
Thank you.
I didn't see.
What I was specifically requesting is that we create one for the Silver Spring and the Wheaton project and possibly Veers Mill. And that we pull those out of the BIPA pipeline, and the sort of philosophy of the BIPA project being it's a combination of design work for larger projects and then small scale projects. But when there's something that's larger, we pull it out and create a standalone. And so it was my thinking that the completion of the Silver Spring and the Wheaton and the Veers Mill could be standalone. So
So those would be three, in other words, essentially it would be 4 BIPA projects, Silver Spring, Wheaton, Veers Mill, and then the rest.
correct. And then we would
So- which is
specify
similar to
the
what you did
the
with BRT
timelines.
last year.
Exactly.
BRT,
And we could specify the timelines so that we can ensure we're on track. And, I thank you for your enthusiasm about the BIPA program. One of the things I think, one of the challenges that we have is externally, it's hard for the public to kind of understand. The internal advantage of being able to move quickly and move on things is a community doesn't quite understand what's there and what to get involved with. So pulling out the specific projects will enable for a little more transparency, engagement, and support, I think, to build.
And we get that. The only concern, we have a series of line items within the grander project that are kind of lumped across and give us the flexibility. If something comes up, we don't have to specifically program the project. We can use that, call it level of effort funding within the project. If we're chopping that up over various projects, it really reduces our flexibility. We might have to transfer money from projects or wait till some money aggregates over a couple of years before we can get into something that might be critical that we have the flexibility to do now. So there's positives and, from our perspective, downsides to this as well.
Well,
That's all. That's what
yep,
we're talking about.
We
the
would
flexibility.
respond urgently and add funding if you needed more funding, but I really would like to ask my colleagues' support to create the standalones as well as to support the funding level that we've identified with all these projects.
So I understand the need for the individual BIPAs, right? BIPETs, maybe. But
Well done.
but there's an overarching problem here, which you just admitted to, that we're behind schedule, right?
I don't think I said we are behind the schedule. I think I said that we will have more capability for implementation. Suppose one of the projects needs a little bit additional funds. If it's partitioned into areas, it's going to be harder to look for that.
So, right, so that was your rationale behind, that was your rationale cautioning going into a BIPET system. But I think when we started this conversation, you had said that we are not at the schedule.
No, I said this project, actually, BIPA is started and it's very dear to me, and we've been pushing forward with implementation of many of the projects under this program. So
then let me rephrase my comments and say, it's my understanding that as of January, we were behind schedule in a number of Vision Zero programs related to this. Is that fair?
Vision Zero, yes. If it's in the Vision Zero program, for example, the council put in money at the budget for FY20 to hire a Vision Zero coordinator by September, October. To my knowledge, that hasn't happened yet, although it's in process.
but that's not really,
That's not CIP.
that's not related.
BIP is,
Fair enough, okay.
In the March update, I guess County Stat will go over where they stand on a number of projects.
Right.
You know, our challenge is, as it relates to the items that we're responsible for, some of the coordination with the state is behind schedule, but the DOT stuff is on track.
Well, and so I just want to say that I understand the individual community desire to know the updates, but I don't want to do anything that will further delay the progress in any of this.
I don't think that would happen for the projects that we want to ensure are on track. Creating the BIPETs
Okay.
is an advantage. For projects that we don't know about as well, and they're sort of in flux, and there's all these variables, and oops, we hit a roadblock there, now let's move over, and that, it's one of the nice advantages of the program, but I think there should be enough funding left to support that function, in my view.
Okay.
kudos for using the word roadblock.
Right.
Oh, that wasn't even intentional. All right.
Hanging out
We're
with these
pretty
guys.
much running with this, at that board.
No, we're not.
That's, a phrase has been coined.
Not yet, we're not.
You can call it informally, but for the CIP, it's still BIPA, okay? The other thing I just need to point out, it's just purely procedural, it shouldn't be any skin up your nose. Whenever you create a new PDF, it's a new project, and off here, you actually have to introduce it, have a public hearing on it, and then act. So it'll still be done within the timeframe of this May, but if you see coming forward, and I guess we'll wait till next week when we have the next 2 weeks when we have the council work session first. But once that's done, if the council agrees, then we'll prepare PDFs for Fears Mill Road BIPA, Wheaton BIPA, Silver Spring BIPA, and all their BIPAs. And those 4 will be introduced. They'll replace the current one. And again, subject to public hearing, and you'll probably have some kind of pro forma thing on your agenda sometime in April to approve them, and it'll be before the council.
And Silver Spring will include Long Branch and include Piney Branch. And then,
That's not what I heard.
What? Well, you tell
Those
me.
are different BIPAs.
Yeah, those are different BIPAs.
So
Those would remain in the main.
Long Branch is gonna stay in the main one? Just downtown Silver Spring? How small is the perimeter?
It's still Silver Spring CBD.
Okay, fine. Okay,
Many is.
thinking ahead to our marketing, okay.
Many is BIPI, just trying to get.
BIPA, BIPA.
Hey, hey,
You're chairing a subgroup on that.
It's a murder of BIPA.
That's not the right turn of
No,
phrase.
it's not any of those things. The wheels are way off the bus here.
Okay, the last item here is actually.
Another good one.
Is just
This is getting derailed.
clean up. You recommended, based on discussion 2 weeks ago, that all of the money for the sidewalk along the north side of Forest Glen Road be in the sidewalk program, minor projects program. So the PDFs that are attached on circles 7 through 10 reflect that, moves the money from the Forest Glen passageway over to the Silver Spring, to the sidewalk program, minor projects. It also reflects the $248,000 federal grant for planning for that sidewalk and reduces the GO bonds by the same amount. That's all it does. And with that, we're done with this item, I think.
Good job getting the grant. Okay, 3-0 on everything, right?
Got it.
Great.
This will, again, the whole CIP will go to the council for work session on March 5th.
Correct.
The next item on the agenda, and you're all gonna have
Yeah,
to,
you
you
guys
don't have to
are
all have to
all on
leave,
your
but
own.
at least one of you can stay, but the rest have to vacate. We have a panel discussion from youth commissioners and the children, Commission on Children and Youth to talk about the Kids Ride Free and Youth Cruiser Pass programs. So,
Yeah, let me add a little context. Come on up, everybody. So for the millions of you watching at home, we're holding this today to monitor the progress of our 2 transit programs serving our young people. Obviously, we all want our transit system to be very responsive to encourage young people to ride transit. We want young people to develop habits of riding transit that'll continue throughout their lives. It's the right thing to do for our young people, but it really benefits everybody because it's consistent with our goals of making our transit system succeed, getting other vehicles off the road. It's a basic equity issue since so many of our young people don't have cars and won't be able later to afford the high cost of car ownership. It's consistent with our ambitious climate goals, which we're counting on you to help us meet. And we want our students to access work and job training and to be able to pick up younger siblings at childcare and to get to doctor's appointments, because if you don't, it all brings cost to all the taxpayers, not just students and not just council members and not just transportation directors. So we've invited you here because we know you have a lot of expertise. You are all transportation commissioners on the HHS Commission on Youth and Families, and these commissioners have conducted a survey to gather data on barriers to accessing ride-on. So we're eager to hear all about that. We need that program, the Youth Cruiser Pass program and the Kids Ride Free program, to work optimally for all our young people. So we're really glad you could join us today. We know you have other places to be, and we're eager to hear from you. Can everybody introduce themselves for the record?
you need to push the button.
Yeah, and you push. Thank you.
There you go. Hold it again. No, you don't, just as long as you try.
Okay. My name is Itamar Fiorino. I'm a student at Montgomery Blair High School.
Terrific.
Hi, I'm Talia Nesson, also a student at Montgomery Blair High School.
I'm Victoria Koretsky. I'm a student at Richard Montgomery High School.
Welcome. Okay. Tell us about your survey. You're on.
So,
Again, you can't hear you unless.
sorry if the
Just keep 'em on.
presentation could be reloaded. I think it's timed out.
Can somebody dim the lights a little? Who's in charge of lights?
Okay, so,
Well, not all the way. Okay. All right.
That might be a little too dim. Thank you, Yi.
it's great. Oh.
Try 40%.
Need some young people in this room to take care of our technology.
Okay, terrific.
There you go.
Thank you.
Greetings. We are members of the County Commission on Children and Youth Subcommittee, and we're here to talk about the transportation polls and roundtable results that came back regarding the youth's access to transportation. I'm Itamar.
Talia.
Victoria.
And Ashley was unfortunately not able to be here for this panel, but she was very much involved in the poll.
Okay, so basically, we decided to want to tackle this issue because a lot of us have had experiences with public transportation, and because we recognize the importance of public transportation in having students have the ability to participate in activities, giving students more mobility, giving students more independence, and apparently students use public transportation to commute to and from school at rates of 36.6% and 42.3% respectively, which means that public transportation has a very large impact on students' abilities to travel to get their education. We wanted to delve a little deeper into how the current system worked because we've received some conflicting information. Some of us have had experiences where bus drivers wouldn't allow us to use passes during times when passes were allowed, and it seems like we're not unique in that regard. And the system seems to be kind of cluttered. A lot of the websites and other information that's online has conflicting or outdated information, or has programs that are said to have started several years ago but don't really seem to be in effect. And a lot of students, like including us, before we started this, I don't think any of us had really heard of the Youth Cruiser Smart Trip card, or were not aware of the fact that this program was being implemented. And a lot of the students of the survey and the roundtable, we'll get the exact numbers in a minute, agree that like are unfamiliar with exactly how the system works. A lot of it's kind of a gamble, and even like what the system is supposed to be doing doesn't always happen in terms of like the hours or routes that IDs are accepted on. And we also believe that even if the system was working like perfectly as it's said to be working right now, we think that some of the routes should be expanded, and that some of the times that are currently being used are not the most effective times for students. And we think that like certain scenarios, such as like half days, the student ID is not working, being able to get home from school, and the fact that like in the mornings we can't do that, can really negatively impact students' abilities to, you know, get places.
Next slide, please.
Okay, so in mid-January, we created the transportation poll. We sent it out through social media, just letting our friends know, and I think we sent it to some...
CRSGA, and I believe a few listservs were also used.
Yeah, and we got 267 responses in total. Well, it's still ongoing, so hopefully we get more. But, yeah.
Next slide.
Hmm?
Next slide.
Oh, no. And then also 3 weeks ago, we had the Youth Having a Voice Roundtable, which is when it's an annual event that we, the commission, host. And we had over 50 youth come to talk about problems that they face in Montgomery County. So we focused on 3 main topics. There was transportation, and then mental health and school safety. And we got a lot of responses about transportation that we'd like to look at.
Well, quickly, if you could go back. For the purposes of this panel and maybe further research, we've made the summary statistics for the current snapshot of 267 responses available. So if you'd like to go to that link and pull that up, it should be in your presentation.
The bit.ly link there.
Yeah, so that includes the all the transportation results and some open-ended questions where students describe some of the difficulties they were having. Next slide. So the first problem that we're citing, or the first topic of 4 topics, is the access to the Youth Cruiser Smart Trip card. We believe that the system is likely fair, and we appreciate the extra mean that students can use transportation. It includes some programs for after-school times, holiday times, and it has several different components that are each personalized to the individual student. But the main issue right now is that students they're not aware of the system, and they don't have access to get these Youth Cruiser Smart Trip cards. So when we come to the recommendations, that's going to be a large consideration. On the next slide, we're going to have a little graph, which is also on the poll, that describes which students know what it is, which students just know the name, which students have it. And in our Youth Having a Voice roundtable of around 60 students, only 4 of them had a Youth Cruiser Smart Trip card. So if you go to the next slide. It may be kind of hard to read, but it's right there. We asked a question in the poll where students were to qualify the statement, "I am familiar with the Youth Cruiser Smart Trip card." A majority of them were not at all familiar with it, had never heard of the term. The smaller smaller group of students had heard of it, didn't know what it was. An even smaller group had heard what it was, and around 15% of students actually had a Youth Cruiser Smart Trip. So that's something that's really major, we believe. The second topic is general unavailability, and maybe not poorly designed routes, but routes that aren't catered specifically to the students, which we believe is a very large consideration that these routes should be taking. Around 16% of the poll responses indicated that they had minimal to no access to public transportation. That 16% of a group of 80,000 students, which, well, sorry, if we need to clarify, the poll was on middle and high school students. That's 16% of students that will not have the opportunity to really develop that comfortability, that level of comfort with public transportation, which when we spoke to the ride-on representative, he mentioned was one of the main reasons for the Kids Ride Free program. So, sorry if the presentation's a little bit paragraph format, but just feel free to read it for yourselves.
You're doing great.
If you want to look at as well at the personal, I guess, additional comments in the survey, and we will as well publish, aside from the ones mentioned in this presentation, we will publish some of the personal anecdotes that students have given with regards to minimal access to public transportation. If we go to the next slide, we have a map of the ride-on routes. We understand there are going to be holes in these routes, but in general, we would appreciate that if in the future the students' transportation from and to school would be a major consideration in the times the ride-on buses are servicing and also the routes that they're taking. Specific route issues are mentioned in the poll, and also on the youth having a voice roundtable. If you want to take that.
Okay, yeah. So the third topic we looked at were the times that the Kids Ride Free program was available to children. So we had a lot of responses in the open-ended question at the end about comments about transportation. We had a lot of responses about going to school. There were a lot of students that needed to get to school using public transportation, and since the Kids Ride Free program doesn't cover that, they had to, a lot of them didn't know about this Youth Cruiser Smart Trip card, and so they just had no way to get to school, or no clear way. Yeah, there's some specific little stories that they shared. And also they mentioned half days, which are big when they happen. And one comment was about abbreviated schedules, since there was a student that was working and they left at noon and they didn't have transportation to get to their job.
Personally, I know that sometimes these times have been loose and bus drivers have not known. One bus driver told me it was 7, when in fact it was 8, and I had to pay for the bus. If I did not have that means to pay, I would not be able to take the bus, and that would be a large restriction on myself. And there have been several times where I've not been able to take public transportation because either it was before 2 o'clock, after 2 o'clock, or the bus driver didn't know, so that's a major issue. One of the students in the Youth Having a Voice Roundtable told us a story that personally touched me. He said he had a similar issue where it was 7:30, he was trying to get on the bus using his student ID, the bus driver didn't let him on. Unfortunately, the way he had to get home was one of his coaches of his sports team had to drive him home. We don't think that anybody should be subjected to this, and for that reason we recommend a 24/7 free rides service for students. We'd like to emphasize that while transportation, the Youth Ride Free program is mainly to adjust students to the aspect of using public transportation, it also has a functional requirement where students need to get to and from their clubs and they don't have cars.
Yeah. This is similar vein of thought of the times of the calendar. Obviously, transportation, as we've seen, is a big factor in getting to school, but another large purpose of it is kids who do clubs, kids who have internships, kids who have jobs, kids who need to get around on the weekends, whether it's for pleasure or whether it's for it's that they have to go to. And if you don't have a car, it can be really restrictive to not be able to attend activities on the weekends if your parents are working on the weekends or if your parents are unavailable to drive you. And a lot of students actually indicated that they would be more likely to use a Kids Ride Free program on holidays and weekends because they might use, the regular school buses on school days, but on days when that was not available or when they weren't trying to go to school, they were unable to get to the places that they wanted to go. And having expanded days as well as times for the Kids Ride Free program would be very helpful. Yeah, 45% of poll responses said that they would use public transportation during weekends and holidays, and several people during the open-ended question and during the roundtable said that they weren't able to, see friends or go to clubs or go to activities that they needed to get to because of unavailability of public transportation for free during those times.
Okay. So on to our recommendations. The first one is regards to topic 1 of the Youth Cruiser Smart Trip card. We recommend that the card should be available at all MCPS middle and high schools. And if possible, we spoke to a ride-on representative. There was a prospect of putting chips inside the student IDs. I know that student IDs have now been used to have lunches, and I think if that were extended somehow to going on buses, that would be extremely beneficial. Also, the website should be modernized. This is more of like a semantic thing, but when we went on the website, it was extremely unclear in regards to what the options were, where to get one, and we think that should be corrected. The next one is general unavailability. School loads should be one of the primary considerations when these routes are made. Drivers should be held accountable for regards to beeping students. If you're not familiar with the term, whenever a student is to show their student ID, the bus driver should, the bus driver is instructed to beep the student in so that it goes into the database and so we know exactly how many students are using the service. And the fact that bus drivers are just letting them on without beeping underrepresents the amount of students that are actually taking the public transportation. So while I think the ride-on, I don't have the exact number, while there was a substantial amount of students using it, we think that is highly underestimating the actual value. So we recommend that for future research. Our second two recommendations, which are kind of addressing the 24/7 free rides initiative, are widened free fare hours. Half-day schedules end at around 12:30 for most schools, and the fact of the matter is, when there's a half-day, students have to pay, and we don't think that that should be true. When we spoke to the ride-on representative, he said that the reason that we start at 2 o'clock instead of 7 a.m. when students are going to school is because that would create a burden on the ride-on system. We believe that if there is an issue with a higher load, just as there is in rush hours, the correction is not to increase the fare from $0 to $2. The correction is to increase work times on those hours. Oops.
I think that's it, actually.
Well, yeah, so
Yeah.
the second one is change schedule times, which I guess I've just been speaking about. And right at the bottom, there's like a rendering here. So thank you for listening to us, and if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
That was terrific.
That was
Wow.
awesome.
Thank you. I think we're all going to have. Very impressive. I know we're going to have a lot of questions, probably for our DOT director to respond to. So right now, can you comment at all on like what DOT does to inform MCPS about these two programs?
Yeah, I will start, but I want Dan to come to the table. Dan is our Chief of Ride-on Services, so I'm sure he's gonna.
Mike.
Yep. First of all, I'm very impressed with the presentation and the level of detail that the students went through. It's very informative and I actually took a lot of notes. In regards to our Kids Ride Free program, the intent was that during day, or at least in the morning, children are expected to use the school bus to go to school. And the reason the Kids Ride Free starts at 2 p.m. was because sometimes high school students are getting off earlier, and that was the time it was chosen for those students who have to stay behind, do after school activities, or they need to go somewhere associated with the school program. That was really I think the cornerstone of choosing 2 to 8. Now, however, I do understand that some of the high school, the seniors get off much earlier than 2 o'clock, maybe at 12 noon. And then that was the primary purpose of providing this. In terms of your comments about bus drivers not allowing the student getting on the bus at 7:30, so that means to me that we need to do a better job informing our bus drivers to make sure that the time is whatever it is the council approved. And however, beside that, I will not avoid taking a kid on the bus even if it's after 8, because if a child needs to get to his destination, I don't care he
Nobody
has a ID card or not. That bus driver has to have the judgment to get that kid on the bus and take it to his destination.
So coming out of this hearing, absent any other policy decisions we make about the hours or anything, you're going to communicate that to the drivers?
Oh, absolutely, because we are here to serve our community, and this is the very first thing we can do. Granted, the decision is until 8 p.m. if that stays until 8 p.m. But my direction to the bus driver and actually to Dan to communicate to his team is that if a child needs to get on the bus, even if it's 10 p.m. and he doesn't have the money, get him in, because that's what we are here for.
Great. Does that sound good? Can you, just back to MCPS,
You know,
what do you do to tell
yeah.
MCPS about these programs? What does MCPS do?
Well, I think
to make sure?
MCPS needs to play a better role, because if there is a lack of information, I think MCPS has the means to reach out to parents, the students, inform them of the program. I think what we're going to do, I mean, we have a number of programs that we go to schools, talk to the students, and inform the school about the program. But we probably need to do more, and we probably need to come up with flyers and things like that that the school can send to students' home, and so the parents and the students are aware of the program. You made a comment that it's very critical, it's important. We need to make sure our children feel comfortable getting on a public system or public transit, and that starts from a young age. And that's one of the reasons we are growing our ridership in transit, but that starts really at the school level. In some of the European countries, they don't have a school bus. Everybody uses the public transportation.
In DC.
And going to, yeah, even in DC, they
Not
don't
just
have
Europe.
the school. But they have to feel comfortable that it's safe and they can get to their destination. So we need to do a better job on educating. But we will need to work harder with our partners in the school to make sure that the students are aware of this program. The youth cruiser, for example, in the summer, it's very inexpensive. I also have a concern, because I do get reports of altercation with children in our buses. There are some times that there's a joyriding, and they are not behaving as we expect from our school children. So there has to be a system in place that actually those who really need to get on those buses and they want to go visit a friend. So it's not something that they want to get 4, 5, 6 of them on a bus and playing cards, going back and forth, or causing interruption. So we had cases like that, and so I will leave it at that at this point.
Okay. Do you want to comment on the recommendations on the routes and whether
Yeah,
y'all were consulted in
yeah, the
determining
routes are not based, I mean, it's based on the overall population and where the needs are. We don't, our bus system is not to go to schools, because we assume the school has the school buses, so we don't go around that. I mean, that's not one of the priority for assuming where the bus routes are. It's looking at where the populations are, densities, and where is the most people needing bus service. Of course, in most cases, many of these high schools and middle schools falls on our routes. But it's important to consider those, and I'm going to ask, by the way, one of the things we want to do is a study and do a review of our route system, our entire transit system, because this is a system that was established almost 40 some years ago, and it's been grown, but never a very comprehensive review of its operations. So that's one of the things we do, and location of the schools, especially high schools, are going to be critical in in that study.
Dan, anything to add?
No, I want to support what Alice said. I think it's exciting with our programs. I think these are my future customers. And the more we can do to get them on board and using transit as a real opportunity and alternative to the car, I think it's a great idea. And you guys did a great job doing this survey. And it's important to me as a provider of this service that you use it and use it a lot. And so I'm really glad you're here today. And certainly everything we can do to make sure that the students are aware about it. I think probably this summer we'll push out to the schools. So back to school programs, they know about the Youth Cruiser program, they know about the free ride program, so that we can get more customers on board.
Right. I think we probably could have seen this coming, but we don't have anybody from MCPS here. We do have a former school board member if you want to comment at all, but I think maybe next time we have Dan back here for a T&E briefing on another bus-related topic, we might want to invite somebody from MCPS to comment and to do a follow-up on this topic.
If I may, I just want to say that in our program, Safe Route to School, we partnered with our high school system. And students like these ladies and gentlemen that's sitting here helped quite a bit because they became our ambassadors. And I think this is an extremely good program. And maybe it needs to be trained, a trainer in going to other schools. Well, I mean, we're going to think about it and we're going to follow up with this team and maybe we can do something in partnership and actually reach out to other high schools in the system and teach them what to do and what is it available in terms of services.
Okay, questions from Hans?
First of all, thank you, Tom Hucker, for chairing this committee and having this discussion today. This is one of the most interesting and I think best uses of this committee that I've seen in a long time. And I just want to compliment you for inviting the students here. It's really cool. I was just thrilled when I saw that this was going to be what we were doing. And I wanted to compliment the students. I think you did a marvelous job. You know, it might seem mysterious what we do as county council members, but what we do is exactly what you just did. You just did it. Like, this is it. There isn't actually a whole lot more to it than what you've done here. So if you look at what we do and you think, boy, that seems kind of crazy and complicated and I don't know if I can do that, well, you've already done it. So don't worry about it. Like, you'll be on this side of the table one of these days too. I wanted to share a little history about this program. I feel it's important to know how we got where we are now, and also a couple logistical questions about the program that we had. But I won't forget one of my favorite moments in my first term in the council. Councilmember Nancy Navarro proposed that we create the Kids Ride Free program, and then I worked very hard at the T&E committee, because I served on that committee that term, to add some funding to the budget to create it. I thought it was a very special moment that Councilmember Navarro was so in touch with her community to know that this was such an important need. The program has changed a bit over time, and now I believe there's an obligation to go get a pass, when I think originally we had something that was a little more flexible. So I wanted to ask for a little history on that if we could. Glenn, should I direct that to you, or Al? Who can just remind us what is the obligation if you want a Kids Ride Free versus the Youth Cruiser Pass?
Youth Cruiser Pass is different than Kids Ride Free. Kids Ride Free, during the time that is allocated, all they have to do is show their student ID. That's all. They don't need.
Kids Ride Free during those hours.
During those hours.
Yeah.
Cruiser is a
Cruiser
different
Pass.
program. Go ahead, explain what the cost is and what is it for.
The Youth Cruiser Pass, there are two versions of it. We have the summer version for $18 to ride all summer long. You've already paid for it.
It's a summer pass.
Yes. There's a summer pass and the standard Youth Cruiser Pass. And so those are the programs we have in place right now.
And how many Youth Cruiser Passes have we passed out? Is it a lot? You think it's like a few hundred, or is
We
it?
get a lot more in the summer, usually around June. We'll get a big rush, especially when kids find out they have summer school.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we usually get a mad rush, parents calling and students calling. Or they get summer jobs or internships, we get
Yeah.
those calls.
Right.
But that's the most successful and the most economical, because it's $18 for 3 months versus $11 a month.
It's a discounted
It's a very discounted
pass. If you know you're going to be riding consistently, then you can kind of calculate the expense.
And those are on a smart trip card.
You are?
Darlene
Eileen, you administer the youth cruiser program
It's
among,
part of the
among
Fair
others?
Radio program. It was developed as a smart trip card that we could put the passes on electronically. So it's a special WMATA Smart Trip Rider Class card that we developed in the county so that the monthly pass and the summer pass could go on to that and the kids could just tap it.
Because it works on WMATA also.
No, the passes are only for ride-on.
Didn't we used to have a WMATA overlap at one point?
No, not for the cruiser pass. Cruiser pass has always just been for ride-on. Kids Ride Free is good on Metro Bus or ride-on.
Now, Kids Ride Free is good on Metro. Kids Ride
Bus.
Free is 2 to 8 p.m. Does that mean that Metro sends us a bill for it and we reimburse them?
Yes, that's really the cost.
If you look on,
They track it
yeah,
and-
if you look on the back page of the packet, it has the cost estimates, costs for the program for Kids Ride Free. The current 2 to 8 p.m. weekdays, that we lose about $838,000 a year in revenue, but we also have to pay WMATA $550,000, the net cost of a little under $1.4 million. And then below that, you'll see 4 other options for expanding Kids Ride Free and how that
So if we were
goes.
to allow all bus service hours to be Kids Ride Free, which would be, is it 18 and under? What is Kids Ride Free? Is it by age or is it by school enrollment?
Under 18.
It's under 18 or 18?
18
and
or under, I think.
18. It's a big distinction when you're in your senior year of high school.
Still in school though, and
Yeah.
Darlene, put your button on, yeah.
Sorry. We do have some schools that'll call us, and they'll have students that have come back to school and they're
Sure,
19 or
there's some
20.
19s.
As long as they're still a part of
So
that
it's
school, we go
18 and
ahead.
under or enrolled in the school.
Correct.
So it would cost,
$1
there's
million.
a lost revenue and then there's a net total cost. 2.3, you estimate $2.4 million to go all in.
That's the total cost. The additional cost over what we're spending now
Oh,
is
the
about $1
added
million.
net cost,
The net cost is $1 million
$1
more.
million, to go all in for all youth to ride free all the time.
And I presume what would happen at that point is that you would discontinue the cruiser passes.
That's
Yes.
So you'd save a little on the administration.
Not necessarily, maybe.
charge $18 for 3 months. It's hardly anything.
Right. Bring in much.
And they probably not used all that widely because there's a significant step to actually take advantage of it. It applies to you if you're going to be a high user in the first place, and then you have to go and deal with the application, and, that prevents most of us. I'm sure it's quick and efficient when you get there. But like all of us, those little things prevent us. Well, I think we ought to push as close to full as we can in this year's budget.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
I know Councilmember Glass sent a letter urging support. I think hopefully the executive will ramp this up in his recommended budget, but if not, I think we ought to get as close to full service, all access as possible. I have a very fond place in my heart for the issue of young people riding the bus, because when I was a kid, first of all, I lived a mile from school, and my parents made me walk, and the bus would drive by, and I was like, I wish I could get on that bus, I gotta tell you. So I've never had that opinion about buses that some people have, like, that's not a desirable place to me. Like, for me, that was always the most desirable place to be, but in any event, I did start to ride the bus when I got into middle school, and I used it to go across town and hang out and see my friends. And it was, for me, the bus was freedom and independence, and I think that's what it is for a lot of people. For a lot of other people, it's also even more important. It's a job, it's income, it's things like that too. But it can be the difference between one whole life and a more constrained, more narrow life that doesn't have as much experiences and maybe doesn't take you to the same place one day. So I did want to comment on the issue that was raised about conduct. It might be worth having some code of conduct that we kind of all agree to, and we could work with the students to frame that up. And there's sort of like a document that you have to sign, maybe even to claim your first pass or something like that. I mean, there's something there. There's something there. I think it'd be worth engaging with the students on that topic, because it's
Right.
we're all in this space together, and we all have to know what the behavior is that we're all expected to follow, and that's a reasonable point of view.
I just wanted to add that aside from the obvious equitability imperative, there is also an economic imperative to people using public transportation.
Absolutely. Right. No, I think the $1 million we spent on this, we'll get back many times over if you all continue to become transit riders throughout the
That's a good
throughout
point.
the rest of your lives.
Start the habits young and then
Right. It's what I started to say at the beginning. Environmental benefits, less congestion on the roads, a working transit system and transportation system for everybody. There's all kinds of benefits for people that still have to drive in a single-use vehicle. Councilmember Glass.
Great, thank you. Awesome presentation, and want to recognize your colleagues who are sitting over there as well.
Yeah, we have many other students. Let me just ask you to stand up and say your names and which school you go to, please. Thank you.
I'm Brian Kramer. I am a senior at Northwood High School.
And you did a great job on the Kojo show the other night.
Thank you.
I'm Danny Miller. I'm a senior at Churchill High School. Hi, I'm Zoe Schroeder. I'm here at Morristown.
And you're also?
Also the nominee for the student member of the board.
My name is Daniel Perez, and I go to Northwood High School. I'm a senior.
Terrific. Thank you all for coming.
Great. And so, the first day I was a fully member of the council, I took the bus to get here to Rockville. And the second day, I went to a student government leader meeting where I met Zoe and some others. And the very first thing Zoe and her friends told me was about public transit and the hard time she had, particularly coming down from Clarksburg High School to get to Rockville and to get to everywhere else that I happen to see her these days.
She's everywhere.
She's everywhere. And I know she takes most of the time, she takes public transit to get there. And so that was the first 2 days I was on the county council, and I think it was probably the third or fourth day I started talking with my team and with staff and saying, how do we fix this? And so I really do appreciate the chair of this committee for organizing this, all of you being here. And in between that time also, members of my staff attended meetings of yours that were ably led by Ms. Lynn Harris, who I want to recognize as well for being the adult leader of your group. And it just kept being reinforced as to how important this is. And I want to thank Dr. Orland for putting together the numbers that I've requested as to asking how we make this possible. And that's the financial numbers. And it is only $1 million. It's not a heavy load to do what we know is right. And you know, I appreciate the depth of your conversation and the perspectives you brought, because not only is it an environmentally friendly thing to do, not only does it foster a culture of transit ridership, but what we know is that not all of your peers throughout the county have access to public transportation or even cars in their household. And the lower income parts of the county have fewer than half, comparably, let me rephrase it. The areas in the county with lower income have twice as many households that don't have cars. And so when you look at some of your peers in some of those clusters, we know they're only getting around by taking the bus. And there are some discrepancies in the current system, things that we've addressed. And by allowing unfettered access through the system, it really eradicates those barriers and does what's right to all of you. And there are a few questions that were brought up here that I'd like some clarification on. Councilmember Reamer astutely pointed out or asked about the youth cruiser smart trip. But what I think was left out of that in the response was my understanding in speaking with the students is that the students have to go to Rockville to pick that up. Isn't that correct?
You can get a pass at the libraries,
Okay, well,
What about
the Smart Trip card. Yeah, any library, you can go in there.
For the-
And a lot of the schools are participating. We need to have a representative, and we send the cards out to them, and they'll sell them in the schools.
well, that's good to know. More public education needs to be done there, because most of the students that I've spoken with, particularly about the summer program, told me they had to schlep all the way to Rockville to pick that up, and that was a barrier for access. So to know that they're available at the libraries or your coordination with MCPS, and I think a future conversation with MCPS is where we need to go. But thank you for that.
Just on that point, is it true, Glenn, everything else in the packet, it says that you can get them at the commuter store in Silver Spring, the
Yes.
mobile commuter stores, and select schools?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The schools are listed on the website, but I'm pretty sure, like, Richard Montgomery is one of them, right? But you said that you haven't,
I've
like,
never heard of it.
yeah, so I
Right.
think some of the, like, schools that it's technically offered at are like, it's unclear exactly how you would like get it, or not well advertised or whatever.
I think
so.
we need a robust conversation with MCPS and the principals.
Yeah.
We do back to school nights. We've done, you know, the county-wide program in Hungerford. So if schools call, we go, and we'll sell them there. And, you know, or we'll work with them if they want to consign and do it, you know, at some of their stores, do it, some of the offices do it. So it depends what works for the schools.
Okay.
The best way you can work if the school, if it's available to a student at the school, so they don't need to go anywhere.
That's
Go to
right.
the principal office and get the call.
And another point that was mentioned, but I'm not quite sure I received, and I heard a fair response, was about the disruptions. So when there are disruptions by students, we can create some policy around that. But the bottom line question is, what happens when there are disruptions among adults? What is the current ride-on policy in that regard?
Well, every bus is monitored by our central dispatch unit. We have road supervisors. Every time there's a bus in service, there's a road supervisor in service. So the operators are instructed to contact central, say I have a disruptive situation. The central dispatch person will direct a supervisor to the bus. Also, we have a silent alarm system, so the operator can just hit the button and it immediately opens up the microphone so we can hear what's going on in the bus. We have a great working relationship with the police department. They respond in a real fast manner because we've had, unfortunately, operators assaulted. So when we have circumstances like this, it's kind of an all hands on deck situation.
Okay. So to be discussed at a later point, but clearly there are policies for adults, and I would hope that we wouldn't need such drastic measures in dealing with sometimes kids being kids. But it's good to know that systems are already in place for what might come. I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate the enthusiasm that you have. You are the best spokespeople for this program, for this policy change, and a lot more public education that needs to be done, working with MCPS, making sure students know what is currently available to you. Forget about what might be available to you if my colleagues and I in the executive move forward with expanding the program. So thank you all for taking the time.
Two brief points. First of all, lest my parents think I've thrown them under the bus, I'm glad they made me walk. It was good for my character, I'm sure.
Pun intended?
Yes.
Okay.
Secondly, I want to challenge you, the students, to organize to achieve this goal. You know, I think the committee has expressed a strong desire to try to do better. We don't know how much we can do, but I think the more involved that you get pushing us, the more likely it is that we'll do more. So, you know, you have to push this across the line.
Absolutely. Okay, and you know, one remaining question for me is, we talked about what the school system does and agreed they could do more, and we'll bring them in at a later date, but do you do any outreach to the rec department on these programs?
To some degree, but
Not much.
not much.
That's one we're in complete control of, and,
True.
right,
Yeah.
and
We
you
can
don't
work
have to
with- we
wait
can
till
work with
next
the rec
semester or
department.
anything, right?
That's a good point.
That's a good idea.
Especially before all the summer classes and programs
Sure.
start, summer camps, those would all be great opportunities,
We'll
right?
certainly reach out to
To
them.
let people know, okay, great. Dr. Orland, any final comments? Okay, thank you all so much for your advocacy, you made a big difference, you opened our eyes to this great need that we're gonna, I think, address. Hopefully we can get the county executive on board, right? And to celebrate your advocacy today, I think we have a citation, is that right? For each one of you.
Excellent.
And your friends in the audience as well, so. Dave? Oh, and I think we want to do a group photo, if that's okay with my colleagues.
Let's do it.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.